I know I say this quite often, but this is truly one of my favorite chapters in modern One Piece at this moment. I really like this chapter because it effortlessly manages to weave together or mold together some of my favorite flashbacks from the entire series and then give it new meaning and new light, especially considering the whole backstory for Zoro and the greater half of his village in the form of the Shimotsuki village. This is really awesome, but before talking about all of that, hello and welcome to WhyZ and thank you so much for joining in. In this video, we're going to talk about One Piece chapter 1033, which is titled Shimotsuki Kozaburo, because yes, we finally get to see that old geezer who has been teased for such a long time and whose silhouette we always wanted to see, and now it is here. It is absolutely here, and possibly in the most One Piece fashion, Oda has managed to introduce his SBS volume jokes. He has managed to introduce some really meaningful flashbacks and some of my favorite flashbacks in the overall series, and then he has molded all of them together into Zoro's backstory, and we are just getting more and more from here on. I'm just really excited to talk about that, so let's just jump into it. But before that, if you're new here, then please consider subscribing to the channel, since I do weekly anime and manga related content along with a bunch of other stuff. So this chapter, as I told before, is titled Shimotsuki Kozaburo because we are introduced to this man, like finally after 1033 chapters we are finally introduced to him, and almost all the speculations about him are actually correct. Yes, he is indeed the fabled Wano swordsman who came all the way to East Blue, and he's the person who set up the village, and he's also the grandfather to Kuina. All of these things are going to tie up together, so again I'm really excited about that. But before jumping into the flashback, we need to establish the context or the scenario of this chapter. Zoro is fighting off against King, but he's still facing a lot of problems with Enma because Enma is dangerously sucking Haki out of Zoro to a very deadly level, and at this moment Zoro is getting kind of frustrated, and this was the moment when he's sort of distracted by all of these things when he is hit by King's attack. And this attack is so devastating that it actually manages to break one part of Onigashima Dome, and Zoro sort of falls down. But that is not all, he also loses grip over his swords. This is something which King really taunts him for, that a swordsman is losing his swords. But in an effort to save his precious swords, he jumps down and he somehow manages to grab some of the swords. Now the first one that he manages to catch is Sandai Kitetsu. Now this is something which leads us to the first flashback all the way down to Lockdown, and we finally get the infamous flashback involving Ippon Matsu's shop? Yeah, it was Ippon Matsu's shop, and this was really exciting. Now as a huge Harry Potter fan, this particular scene always really enticed me a lot, and the themes, the message and the overall meaning behind the scene is something which is reflected in this entire chapter, involving the parts which are dedicated to Kosaburo as well. And this is something which I really enjoyed because it's that one particular scene wherein Harry was getting his wand. Ollivander tells to Harry that the wand chooses the wizard. Like when I first read One Piece, this moment immediately clicked with me, and I was like, okay, this reminds me a lot about Harry Potter, because in a very similar fashion, I mean, the words are not the exact very same things, but in a similar manner, it's stated here that the swords also choose their users. And that is something which even Kosaburo later on describes to Zoro, a young Zoro, and we get the true meaning behind a cursed sword. Like, it's been something which has been a topic of discussion and debate for a really long time among the One Piece fandom, that what exactly is the curse? What is the cursed sword all about? Why did it get a curse? And why are these named swords only the ones which are cursed? Because Ippon Matsu was very scared to sell Zoro the Sandai Kitetsu, because if Zoro was killed, it would have been upon his name that he is the person who sold the sword, so he didn't want to do something like that. And that's when we get the first flashback, and beyond this we also get the infamous flashback of Wado Ichimonji, the OG, the numero uno sword of Zoro, because we get to see the Kuina flashback. And this is something which I really love, and I'm going to talk about the cursed sword in a bit, but before that I want to talk about Wado Ichimonji, because I think that this is really important. Prior to getting into Wano and prior to getting Enma, I really always wanted to believe that Wado Ichimonji is going to be the sword which is going to become Zoro's first official black sword, I mean, if we discount Shisui, then it's going to be his first official own sword, which is going to turn into a black sword. Because thematically, it makes a lot of sense for Wado Ichimonji to be the first one. I mean, sure, there's always going to be Enma. And now that we are so deep into Wano, we got to know so much about Oden, and we have really wrapped our heads around Enma so much that we have literally forgotten how important Wado Ichimonji was in the life of Zoro, and it continues to do so. I mean, technically, it is a little dull looking sword. It's not as interesting as, say, something like the Amano Habakiri or Enma for that matter, but even in its simplicity, it's a sword which has stayed with Zoro for the longest amount of time. It's the sword that belonged to his best friend who died, and this is the sword with which Zoro swore to Kuina that he's going to become the world's greatest swordsman. So this is the sword which is actually going to do that, and this chapter sort of exemplifies my belief. It sort of solidifies my belief that yes, it is going to be Wado Ichimonji, and I'll probably make a separate video talking about that, because here this chapter sort of implies that it's going to be Enma. But if you have read One Piece for such a long time, and if you're reading in between the lines, I think the hints are given all the way long, especially with some of the wordings that have been used here. And while all of this is happening, obviously Zoro is still trying to fight off against King. And in the backdrop of all of these things, we also get a very subtle explanation about King as well from the Queen vs Sanji fight. It is indeed the fact that he belongs to the extinct Lunarian race, the race which was once considered to be a race of gods because they were able to survive in literally any kind of an environment, but now this race is extinct. And Sanji asks, well, if that's actually the case, then how did King's race become extinct? And Queen, in a very classic manner, says that, why should I actually tell you? But even though he's going to reveal some more information later on down the road, but either way, it's always nice to get some more exposition or backstory about King, because King is really looking amazing as a character so far. But while all of this is happening, Zoro finally managed to take up Enma as well. Like, Enma was stuck upon the ground, but now he is actually connecting all the dots. He also has a flashback to Tengu-yama, who reminded Zoro that the Sandai Keiretsu is actually his creation, but the Wado Ichimonji is actually created by the same person who crafted Oden's beloved sword, that is Enma. So this is the moment when everything clicks for him, and he finally gets the flashback involving the old geezer from his village, that is Shimotsuki Kozaburo. His face is finally revealed, and you know what, this is absolutely hilarious but at the same time on point, because Oda has brought back a joke from the SBS volumes. Now, for those of you who don't know, Oda always answers some of the fans' questions in his SBS volumes, and one of the questions back in the day was, what if Wado Ichimonji was actually impersonated into a person? I can't exactly recall the correct words for it, but it was sort of something like that, and Oda gave us this particular image, which was the impersonation of Wado Ichimonji as a person. And as you can see, this figure, that is Shimotsuki Kozaburo, is actually a splitting image. If anything, he's just older. And here we also get to know that Zoro learned the word Tsunachi from none other than Kosaburo himself. Now, some people might come to the conclusion that Zoro's Shimotsuki link are going to stop here, because Kosaburo never really explicitly told Zoro anything about his own Wano heritage or Wano lineage. If he had something like that, maybe Kosaburo should have told him, but I digress. I still believe that Zoro has a link, a major link to Wano. It's just that Kosaburo wasn't interested to tell Zoro about something like that for some particular reason. But nevertheless, we are going to talk about that in a separate video. I don't think we should necessarily diverge into a topic like that here. But moving forward, Zoro is given 2 swords by Kosaburo to practice. I can't really tell if these are the 2 swords which Zoro actually carried in the starting of the series. I might be wrong here, because Kosaburo here says that this is the only thing which I can craft at this moment. I'm out of my prime, but during my prime days, I crafted my numero uno, my magnum opus, which I nicknamed the Lord of the Underworld, and that is actually none other than Enma. Zoro realizes all of these things, and that's when he also comes to the conclusion that Enma is not doing anything wrong. It is Zoro, it is he himself who is not taking this the correct way. the sword actually expects the user to be at a certain level, at a certain capability, and he comes to the conclusion that maybe Oden was not limiting off his haki, he was giving Enma the haki necessary for him to charge, and that's when he finally unlocks. I'm not sure if unlocks would be the correct word here, because Kaido literally told Zoro that he has conquers haki, so maybe the word unlock is not appropriate here, but he sort of turns off his limiters and he lets his haki loose, and Zoro therefore starts properly using Conqueror's Haki, and he's quoting his Conqueror's Haki. So is this advanced Conqueror's Haki? We'll have to watch that, but either way, Zoro brings out his Conqueror's Haki, and we see a bunch of the beast pirates actually get knocked down by his Conqueror's Haki. And before moving forward, I also need to specify the words which Kosaburo actually said, which is, the swords are not actually cursed. It's just sort of a myth or a joke which has been propagated by the weak, because the swords are never actually cursed. It's the true meaning of a sword to actually kill, and a swordsmith is always going to be happy to see a sword which can kill the most number of people. It's a sort of philosophical concept here, and I really like how the explanation for the cursed sword is actually given. It's not inherently saying us that okay, the sword cannot be actually cursed, but at the same time we also get a thematic explanation about what is actually going on here. So this is something which I really enjoy a lot, and prior to this chapter, my explanation or my understanding about a cursed sword was that it was sort of cursed by, say, the spirit of the dead, but it's not inherently something like that, but at the same time it's not discrediting an idea like that, because a sword's task is to kill as many people as possible, and a good swordsman is going to fulfill that promise, is going to fulfill that desire of a sword. And that is something also happening here as well. Enma is asking for more haki, and here Zoro was sort of trying to cut it off. He was trying to maintain his haki, not release it too much. But here on the other hand, he understands that in order to properly tame Enma, he needs to in a way stop his limiter going off, and now he needs to unleash his full haki. So the next chapter we might finally see a clash of advanced Conqueror's Haki, because I believe that King obviously has Conqueror's Haki, so maybe sparks are going to fly next chapter. Either way, this was a really lovely chapter because we got so many things. The flashbacks were really awesome. I really enjoy the Kuina flashback, and it also sort of exemplifies my theory that Wado Ichimonji is actually going to be the sword, which is going to turn into a black sword for the first time for Zoro. I'm sure Enma might also be something like that, but I still believe that Zoro is going to leave Enma upon Wano, and Tengoyama is actually going to give the Nidaiki Tetsu to Zoro. So maybe something like that is what we are going to see in the future of the series, especially during the quote-unquote post-Wano arc. But nevertheless, the importance of Enma is going to be very important here, and let's see how Oda handles all of these things. So that's it for today, guys. This was One Piece chapter 1033. What do you guys think about all of these things? Please do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like it, share it with your friends, and I'll see you all on the next one.